Hey guys, there's a new huge chess drama going on. So I'm here in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, playing and covering the UzChesscup, where Yan Nepomniachtchi, Hans Neiman, Arjun Regaisin, Nodirbek Abdusatorov, Vidit Santosh Gujarati, Shakriyar Mamediyarov, and some other top players are competing. And I'm playing in the open section. I will show you 3 games that ended decisively from the Masters section, and I'll show you one of the games from the open section that is my game. And before we start, I have to say that what is the scandal about? Well, Hans and Nepo are now arch enemies. Hans, when there was a technical meeting before the event, Nepo entered the room and everybody was already there sitting, and Nepo started shaking hands with all players, all grandmasters, and he deliberately ignored Hans Neiman. And Hans was not even looking at Nepo, so apparently they are not on speaking terms. That is interesting, because they had this conflict after their match. Nepo said that the prize fund was not what they promised, and Hans was upset about some things Nepo said. So interesting stuff going on. And this, I think, affected the performance of both of those players. Let's take a look at their games. And also, please drop a comment. What do you think about their conflict? Who's right and who's wrong? If you've studied this conflict, please drop a comment. So Yan is playing in the first round against Mukhidin Madaminov, who is the second of none other than Jawahir Sindarov, the winner of the candidates tournament. Mukhidin is very strong. He's just, I think, 19 years old, but he's already in the Uzbek national team, which is one of the strongest teams in the world, and that means something. And he's a guru, an expert in openings, because he has prepared Jawahir, and you know how Jawahir scored, and a lot of it is due to his opening prep, everybody says. So Mukhidin is very dangerous, even though he's 150 rating points rated lower than Yan Nepomniachtchi. And he goes for the neither Sicilian. Nepo goes d6 here. In the match against Hans, recently he was playing knight c6 and bishop b5 for Salima. All throughout the whole match they played this variation. Here Yan probably decided to switch it up to surprise his opponent, but Nepo has been playing the Neither throughout his whole career, and probably Mukhidin should have been ready for that. And this is the starting position of the Neither Sicilian. Here there are like 20 different moves that white can employ, and one of the rarest ones is a4, which is exactly what Mukhidin chose. And this was obviously his home prep, and Yan stopped to think here. The main line here is e5, and the knight goes to f3, then bishop e7, bishop g5, and there are some ideas to take on f6 and to erect this knight on d5, which is a very nice and juicy square, an outpost. So Yan thought here for some time, and he knew, of course, that Mukhidin is very dangerous in openings, and he decided to play something that is very rare and dubious, but to get Mukhidin out of prep, out of his opening book. He went h6, a very rare move. Alireza played it once before, and I think Maksudlu also played it once before, but they were just 2 games before that in the h6 line. Well, one of the pros of this move is that now you are preventing bishop h5, bishop g5. The con of this move is that now white can change the plan and use this a4 and h6 moves to their advantage, because a4 is definitely more useful than h6. h6 is not doing too much unless like white blunders the bishop on g5. So white just develops calmly and takes, and now goes a5. And this is where we see that this a4 move was much more useful than h6, because with h6, is black going to go g5? No, never in their life. So h6 is just a wasted move. And white occupied some space on the king side. Now white is ready to put some piece on b6. This is the square that belongs to white. Also, this light square bishop of black is bad, but still the game goes on. White has some advantage, but it's a game. Bishop e7, they continue development, and now black strikes with d5 in the center, bishop drops back, and c5. Now black wants to do something about their bishop, the light square bishop, probably putting it on the long diagonal is the right choice. White takes. Why does white take? Because whenever your opponent's king is in the center, you should open the center. This is a rule of thumb. You should all know this. So takes, and now rook e1, putting pressure in the center. And now Yan is playing with fire. Nepo is playing with fire. Nepo goes bishop e6, and even for me, it would be obvious that the move to calculate for white is here is the rook sacrifice, the exchange sacrifice. And the engine says it's the best move. Takes, bishop g6, black's king has to run to d7. And in the post-match interview, post-game interview, Mukhidin said that he was calculating this, but did not know whether this is correct or not. I think he probably missed before. Before is a very, very strong move, and it's, well, not winning, but it has very, very dangerous threat here, because if black takes, queen d4. Queen d4 is such a devious move. If you take the knight, queen a4, and black is just checkmated. King here, queen here, and it's forced checkmate. So probably queen d4 was missed by Mukhidin. Otherwise, he would have gone for this. But the black is not obliged to take this b4 pawn. Probably bishop g6, and the game goes on. But with such a weak king in the center and open files on the queen side, black doesn't have a good square to hide the king. So rook takes e6 would have been very good, but queen d2 is also very good. And it has another sacrifice. This move has another sacrifice in mind. Black castles, and now bishop takes h6. So this is another drawback of this move h6. Whenever you move pawns in front of your king, especially if you plan on cancelling kingside, h6, yes, you give your king luft in some variations, even though in this variation the square is controlled by the bishop, so there is no luft. But also you create a hook for your opponent to use and sometimes to sacrifice pieces on. If black takes here, black is completely busted here, because the rook goes to e3 and then g3 check, and black is lost. Black has no defense against this checkmating attack. So of course you cannot take the bishop, but from afar both opponents actually calculated that black has c4. Mukhidin said after the game that he knew that Jan will go to c4 and he will sacrifice the bishop again on g7, which is exactly what happened. Now, again, Jan cannot take here because queen g5 check leads to a devastating mating attack, but he instead takes a different bishop. But now a rook is taken, bishop takes, and white takes a pawn. And when the dust settles, you know what we get? A very peculiar material imbalance. Black has 2 bishops for a rook and 3 pawns, which is a lot. Usually a rook and the pawn is sufficient compensation for 2 pieces. Sometimes a rook and 2 pawns, because 2 bishops are very strong, obviously. But rook and 3 pawns definitely is more than enough for 2 bishops. But still the engine says it's around equal, because the bishops are the bishops, and because black in some variations has access to this file, to pressure, like in the Benko Gambit spirit, to pressure white on the queen side, and also yeah, it's a crazy position. What can you say? I think you can analyze it for hours. Bishop g7 is played by Jan. Rook a4 is the move chosen by Mukhidin. I really like it. Rook lift to put the rook somewhere on the king side to continue the attack. Queen c7, h3. h3 is a useful move, because otherwise black was intending to go queen g4, knight g4 and attack on the king side. So h3 is prophylaxis. Rook b8, and rook b8 is a mistake. Rook b8 is a mistake. It's a miscalculation, and it was played too fast. I think this is the decision that cost Jan Nepomniachtchi this game, because he had more than an hour. Mukhidin had 37 minutes, and Jan is famous or notorious for playing very fast, and sometimes this backfires, like in the match with Ding. In some games he rushed it, and probably without Russian he would have won that match and become the world chess champion, because he blundered by Russian, but he's Russian, so this is logical. And here he rushed it as well. So he gave up the a6 pawn. I don't think that he blundered. He wanted to take on b2 and then to open this diagonal and attack the c3 knight, which is exactly what happened. But he probably missed that after queen d3 protects the knight, white wants to push the pawn, and he probably missed that after bishop dropping back, rook dropping back, and d4, which is the move that probably he saw from afar. I think he's calculating very fast. I think he calculated all this. He thought that the knight should retreat, but there is a6, and this pawn is queening unless you stop it. And probably from afar, I think Jan wanted to take this knight, and after a7 go bishop c6, and like he took the knight. Now he gives up the bishop for this dangerous pawn and gets an endgame where he has 2 pieces for the rook, like this, and it could have been okay for black, but for one important resource, which probably he missed from afar, which is understandable. This is like a long variation. Other moves are not so convincing for white, but rook e3 wins immediately, because white wants to take this pawn. If white takes this pawn, then this passed pawn will decide the game. But also white has this threat, rook g3 check. For example, if black takes on c2, rook g3 check, and black is pinned and cannot cover the king. King has to go somewhere, and now the bishop is lost, and white wins. So probably this long variation from afar is what Nepo missed when he played d4. He missed that this is possible. He spent some time after d4, a6, and realized that he's busted, so he went rook b8, but it's not helping him. So he spent some time moving the rook to b2 and then back to b8, whereas his opponent just is pushing the pawn, and the pawn on the 7th rank is worth, usually, like, it's good rule of thumb, a pawn on the 6th rank is already close in value to a minor piece, and a pawn on the 7th is sometimes worth a rook. So this is the case here. It's a very dangerous pawn, and white trades the knight here, and still black has the two bishops for a rook and 3 pawns, but black's king also is weak, and this pawn is too strong. So here white makes another rook lift to put pressure on g7, queen d6, rook g3. Now checkmate in 1 is threatened. Queen has to stay guarding this bishop, and now just rook b1. We want to go a7 and then rook b8 check and then promote the pawn. Black cannot take here because queen c8 will come with check and win the rook. So black sidesteps with the king, but rook b6. Now this is pinned. So first one bishop was pinned on g7. Now this pin is no longer there, but there is another pin. And black is just busted. Bishop h6, queen e2, and black resigned because queen c4 will come next, and this bishop is pinned, and if black goes rook here, then we have different resources. We have even a7 and a8 queen. So black will lose this game. In 33 moves, Jan completely collapsed. I don't remember last time Jan lost so fast. So kudos to Muhyiddin for playing a brilliant game. But what happened with Hans Neiman? He also had some problems in today's game, so let's take a look. He was playing against Nicholas Theodoro, a very strong Greek grandmaster. He's not 2700, he's not super gem, but he has defeated recently none other than Gukesh D in the Grand Swiss, I think. And he's very strong online. He always plays those matches against Hikaru Nakamura. I've seen lots of his online games, and he's a very, very, very strong grandmaster. These days, 2600s can and will sometimes defeat super GMs. Take a look at this game. So this is the same as Slav defense. I've actually been playing it throughout my childhood with black. And Nicholas with white chooses a rare setup with g4. I really like it, by the way. Here there are two moves. h6 is the more cautious one, which Hans uses after a 10-minute thing. But knight takes g4 is also possible. And after rook g1, when the knight retreats, g7 falls, and it's a crazy position. For example, black can take on h2, takes, rook takes g7, and then there are crazy lines here. Black is up a pawn, but rook and on g7 looks very intimidating. So Hans decided to not go for this. After g4, he went h6, and then he struck in the center. It's a good rule of thumb: whenever your opponent is attacking on the flank, you need to blow open the center. This is a good way to counter flank attacks. So here the center gets a little bit open. The queen gets attacked, queen drops back, we take, and knight f6. And it looks like black is doing fine. White's king is stuck in the center, and at this point when I took a look at this game, I already finished my game. My game was very fast. I will show it to you later. I was already, I went to the hall where the grandmasters are playing, and I was like, okay, I think Hans will win this game because White's position is dubious. White created some weaknesses. This pawn is also hanging on h2. Black will castle very, very soon, probably bishop d7 and castle alone. So, and this is exactly what happened. So a3 kicking the knight back. Now they trade. h3. Now this pawn is no longer hanging because it's not there. And now black somehow allowed knight f5 and the trade of the bishop for the knight, which is, I would have preferred g6 to not do this, but okay, it's also understandable. Black decided that the two bishops are not so menacing here. Black kicks white queen, and now castle's long, and black has a rock solid position at first glance, and the engine approves, actually. Like, the engine says g6, maybe g6 here is like here is also is maybe a little bit safer, but still bishop d7 is not spoiling too much. So here we get this long castle, and black is hiding the king on b8, white is hiding the king on b1. This is also a good rule of thumb, to put your king on b1 or b8 when you castle long, to hide it. This is exactly what happens for both sides. And this is a very instructive moment here, because what Nicholas does with his pieces is very funny. So first he puts this bishop, the dark square bishop, on c1. He puts it on this home square. It's okay for knights. To put your knight back on b1, for example, or on at g1 is not a good idea, because knights belong in the center. They control more squares in the center. Bishops, on the contrary, are long-range pieces, and from their even starting positions, they can control lots of squares. Once white pushes e4, for example, the bishop will play an important role, and spoiler alert, it will play an important role. But then, after queen f6, rook d3, knight b6, takes. What Nicholas does here is he puts another bishop on the starting square, bishop f1. But it's safe and sound there. It's controlling lots of squares, and it's a perfect place for this bishop, come to think of it. So really, it's funny. And after queen d6, black really wants to maybe infiltrate with the queen. White puts the rook on the starting square on h1. So now I'm expecting white to play queen d1 and somehow put the king on e1, and white will have achieved the starting position of all pieces. But that's not what happened. Here, Hans started going crazy a little bit. I don't know why he did what he did. He could have waited, put the queen on f6, for example, and he has a solid position. But he went queen d5, attacking the rook, and he allowed a4, attacking the queen, and attacking the h6 pawn. And probably he was thinking, probably he saw this, and he was thinking that the bishop will get in trouble if it takes the pawn, because g5, and this bishop is stuck here, and it has no squares to go to. Everything is controlled by black. But h4 is a very logical move, and I don't know what Hans missed from afar. f6 is the most resilient defense here, but still takes, rook h5. Black is like, it's possible for black to defend this pawn, but black is down a pawn. Black will defend valiantly. Maybe black will save this game, but it's not looking good. Instead, here after h4, f6 was not played. Hans took this pawn, and he somehow thought that he can erect some kind of blockade, but rook h5, and after bishop f4, probably Hans was calculating that takes, and he's fine, which is true. If takes, this is equal, because rook goes to d2. This is a very important threat, and the light squared bishop, while it looks nice, it has no targets, and it's not better than the knight that can be put on e5, for example, and be a great blockading square. So with one f pawn and active pieces, black is controlling lots of squares. The queen in particular is amazing and untouchable on f4. So this will be close to equality. Even though white is up a pawn, black will win back some of those two pawns, one of those two pawns. That is if white takes on f4, but white is not obliged to take. It's not checkers. e5 is a very strange move that was chosen by Nicholas Theodoro, and probably this was missed by Hans. If black takes, then bishop g5 is very strong, winning the rook on d8, so black cannot take. Instead, black goes queen g6, trying to trade the rooks, and then we get this check. White cannot take because the queen is pinned, so bishop draws back again to the starting square, and we take the f1 bishop, but white is winning because white has an extra pawn, and the pawns are just marching like this. White trades, after this check, trades the queens, and gives a check, and then pushes the pawn. And the pawns are marching, and they're unstoppable. Here, knight d5 was chosen by Hans, and now e6, and Hans even cannot take this pawn, cannot win this pawn, because white will give a check from h8 first, king moves here, and then e7, and the pawn is unstoppable. So black will have to give up the rook for that pawn. So that is why After e6, black cannot take the f4 pawn. Black goes king d8, trying to stop the pawn, and anything wins here. Rook takes b7, for example, wins. But Nicholas played this game with 98.5% accuracy. Very, very impressive stuff. So he went to rook f7, not allowing the capturing of this pawn. And then after 93, he pushed f5. And when black takes, you don't take back, because if you take back, knight takes, and black may survive this. But instead of taking there, g5 is the move. And now we want to push this pawn. We have two passed pawns, and they are both marching. And after rook g1, g6, and black resigned. Because if the rook takes the pawn, now this bishop on c1 is no longer pinned, and the bishop will take the knight, and white will win. Otherwise, the pawn will march further and queen. So both Hans and Nepo, after participating in the scandal, lose. Maybe this affected them somehow. Please drop a comment what you think about this. And let me show you another game that ended not in a peaceful way. So Shakriyar Mamedyanov, a very strong Azerbaijani player who is the main coach of none other than Yagiz Khan Erdogmush, the Turkish prodigy, the strongest 14-year-old in history, as he was called by Magnus Carlsen, I think. Yagiz already is 2700 plus. And I thought that Shakriyar is not an active player anymore, but he is. This is his first tournament, I think, in this year. But Shakriyar himself, in the post-game interview, said that he's more of a coach. It's more important, the coaching role for him now, these days. But still, he decided to play this event. And oh boy, he probably did not regret it. So in this position, I just wanted to show this game to you because it illustrates the complexity, how difficult is chess, how complicated this game is. So both of those guys, Vidit, whom I've recently interviewed, by the way, the podcast will be out soon on this channel. Drop a comment if you are waiting for this. So Vidit is very strong and a very cultured, educated chess player. He knows lots of endgames. So does Shakriyar Mamedyanov. But they both made a load of mistakes because chess is hard. Shakriyar in the interview said that yeah, he definitely knows this endgame, and he studied it when he was young, but yeah, he was like 15 or 16 when he studied it, and he didn't remember all the intricate details of it. It is winning, but you have to go in this position, white to move, f4. You have to go f4, preventing f4 by black, fixing this pawn structure, and in many variations you can give up this g3 pawn, because you pushed your b pawn. For example, if rook g1, you don't give up the pawn immediately. You go first taking the rook and defending the pawn. Rook goes back. Now you go rook b7, and black's king cannot participate in the action. And then you just, if you get harassed like this, you again kick the rook away, and now you push the pawn. And if you get checked, you slowly maneuver your king, and you can already give up the g3 pawn. You can push b5, but it's complicated from afar. If you don't remember this exactly, that this is winning, this is not obvious. Rook takes g3, b6, and this is winning because after rook b3, you can march with your king to c2, and you will promote this pawn sooner rather than later. If rook f3, for example, you can give up the f4 pawn, and it's very important not to rush here, but first to go king c3, preventing the idea of putting the rook behind the passed pawn by black, because as Siegbert Tarrasch, a famous master of the past, famously said, rooks belong behind passed pawns. That applies both to your rook when you have a passed pawn, like here, for example. Remember this game? Again, this rook is behind the a pawn, the passed pawn, and it's very good for Mukhidin Madaminov. Here, exactly. Also, if black gets the rook behind the b pawn, it's good. Black can stop this pawn and march with the f pawns, but it's too late. It's too late. Black will not succeed in this. After rook f1, we have rook b4, and you can interpose the b file, and the pawn will queen. So that was winning. Here f4, but Shakriyar did not find it, and Shakriyar was frustrated. He told the interviewer after the game. So he was shuffling the pieces, the pawns, and this is winning, but now this is a draw. So rook g1, now rook b4. If black takes, white can play for a win, because rook f4 is holding everything together, and the king with the pawn jointly will do a great job of helping the pawn promote. But black is not obliged to take here. Black can go king f7, which Vidit found to his in his defense. I can say that he played this stage of the game brilliantly. And after rook f4, king e6, king is closer to the pawn now. King is also protecting everything here. And this is a draw. After b4, king e5, king e3, rook b1. Rooks belong behind passed pawns, as they say. And here rook is doing a great job of stopping this pawn. King d3. And here, with 3 minutes on the clock, Vidit made a fatal mistake. He should have continued playing with the rook behind the passed pawn. And if the king goes here, for example, you can go rook g2. And after b5, you can take this pawn on g3. And the rook on f4 will be hanging. And it has to move. And now you take this pawn with check. And then you are in time to go. You cannot put the rook behind passed pawn, but you can put it in front of the passed pawn. But still, you have your own pawns. And this will be enough for a draw. So this is what he had to do. Wait until the king goes here. And then, only then, harass the g pawn. He rushed it. He went rook g1, harassing the pawn immediately, but it loses because now b5 we push the pawn, and after rook takes g3, this rook is hanging. But you don't have to go rook b4. Rook b4 is a draw again. Rook takes f3 with check, but you don't have to go rook b4. You go king e3. The king is protecting, nicely protecting everything. And now next move rook b4, and white wins. And this is exactly what happened. Rook is behind. Now the rook is in front of the passed pawn, which is not optimal. It could have been optimal in case black was able to win this f pawn. Then it's drawable. But with the f pawn, black has no passed pawns of their own. Yes, they have 2 pawns here, 2 f pawns against 1 f pawn of white, but it's not helping. Those are double pawns. And slowly but surely, white advanced the king. And here it's funny because black has to go into this pawn endgame, and black is actually a pawn up in this pawn endgame, but it is losing because white's king will, like this or like this, doesn't matter, will take both of those pawns, and white will be up a pawn in this endgame. And here Vidit Gujarati resigned the game, and Shakriyar scored an important win. Other 2 games ended in draws, the game of Arjun Erigaisi and the game of Nodirbek Abdusatorov, who was playing another Nodirbek Yakuboev. Crazy game, by the way. Nodirbek always plays those crazy games, I've noticed, where he is like -3 or -4, completely lost, but he is a calculated monster. He calculates everything, and his opponents often lose such positions. In this case, his opponent did not find a win, and they repeated the moves, but it was also enjoyable. But let me show you my game. Last but not least, it's from the first round of the open section. I was paired against a junior from Uzbekistan who is just 8 or 9 years old, a really tiny boy. But you see his rating is very, very small. But it doesn't mean that I should underestimate him, obviously, because those guys are always underrated. So I was serious about this game. I played the French defense, which I usually played in my childhood and now sometimes employ. And here, this is the so-called advanced variation, and my opponent decided to go for the gambit line with bishop d3. I actually played it myself many times, and I even have a course on this on the chess platform. So you should check it out if you haven't yet. So this is called this Milner-Berry gambit, and after takes, in my course and in all modern practice, I think everybody now plays castles here. So this is dangerous because if black takes, knight c3, black helps white's development, and white is better according to the engine, even though white is up a pawn. Taking is not necessary, but still, it's an interesting position. But instead of this is an idea by neural networks, these castles. This was not known in the past. In the past, everybody played c takes d4. So when I was playing chess semi-professionally as a kid, this was the meta, this was the position, and black cannot take on d4 because then white takes and goes bishop b5, check, and the queen gets lost. It's a discovered attack on the queen. So you cannot be too greedy and take this pawn too fast. You have to first go bishop d7, preventing this check, and now later you will take this pawn, which is exactly what I did, and we got this position. This is another version of this gambit, which is not so good, but still white has some compensation for the sacrificed pawn. The main move is queen e2, I think, and knight c3 also was used throughout the good old days of chess. But now the engines say that queen e2 is a little bit better. But my opponent played queen b3, and I've never seen this move, and I stopped to think. I thought maybe it's home prepped, like some crazy prep against me, but I calculated that I can take, of course, this pawn, but he'll take this pawn. I'll drop back, he cannot trade the queens. He goes queen a6, and I was looking at this position and I'm like, nah, I don't believe you. This is very good for me. But I decided, you know what, I will avoid this. I will not trade these pawns. Instead, I will go queen b4 and try exchanging the queens. And if he declines the queen exchange, if he goes queen d1, then I'll just put my knight on c6. And it will be a great position because he wasted basically 2 tempi. He went queen b3 and after queen b4, which is a useful move for me because I escape some ideas like bishop e3 sometimes harasses my queen. So queen on b4 is better. So he spends two tempi going back and forth, whereas I improve my position, and I thought this is safer, queen b4, and it's perfectly fine for me. I have an extra pawn. The evil bar is glitching. Let me turn it off, but the engine says it's minus 0.8 currently, so I have a healthy extra pawn. He has nothing. He decides here to trade the queens, to open up the a file, to try and harass my a7 pawn, but it is not something that I should be afraid of. I can play a6, but I find an even better move here, knight e7. If he takes here, I'll go knight c6 and his bishop is pinned and will be lost. If he takes like this with the rook, then I take and go knight c6, and it's a double attack on the bishop and on the e5 pawn, and e5 pawn will get lost, and it's -2 already. So I think it's a nice find, very not necessary, but it's the best move in the position and very precise. I'm not wasting time on going a6. He goes rook c1. He tries to go for some counterplay, but I prevent this. I go knight c6. Now his pawn is hanging, and he goes knight c3. He really wants to go for some counterplay like this, and he's provoking me to go d4, which is a fork. But then after d4, he has knight b5. And I calculated for some time this variation takes, and I can take with check, for example. And I decided probably it should be winning for me. I can even capture another pawn. His knight is very ugly in the corner, probably will get lost. But still, why do I have to give him any counterplay? I'm up a pawn. I should be winning. It's not just a pawn. It's a healthy central pawn. It's completely winning. I should avoid any shenanigans, so I'm not going d4, and I'm very proud of my choice. I just take the pawn instead. I just take a second pawn. I'm not going for those forks. He goes bishop b5, and now of course I'm not helping him with his initiative, which would be this position already is equal, even though I'm up 2 pawns, because there are too many threats, and one of the pawns will be taken, and then b7 might also get taken. So this is very dangerous. Of course, I do not take this bishop, facilitating his development. Instead, I go bishop e7. I'm very calm. I take with the king, and I avoid all of his threats. So here he has no threats. He decides to pick up 1 pawn, but here my knight is jumping in, knight d3, and I'm completely winning. His rook is hanging, his pawn is hanging. He goes here, and I'll go rook a8, and his bishop is hanging. But if the bishop retreats anywhere, I'll go rook a1, and it will be bad news for the king that has no luft. So he moves knight b5. He protects this bishop, and I find here a very beautiful, but a very easy tactic: bishop c5. Double exclaim, according to the chess.com engine, a brilliant move. But it's really easy. Like, it's something that you could find in Puzzle Rush exercises. So bishop takes c5. It's rook a1, and again, due to this weakness of his first rank, he's losing. Otherwise, if he's not taking my bishop, I will take his bishop, and I will be up a full piece and also a pawn. So he decides to take and gets checkmated here. He resigned the game. Obviously, the class difference showed, but thankfully, like, I'm always very worried about playing those juniors who are very young, because they are always underrated. But in this game, probably if we meet again in a couple of years, he will be the favorite. But for the time being, I am the heavy favorite. So if you enjoyed this video, drop a comment if you want some more recaps like this, and hit the like button. See you tomorrow for the next recap. Bye bye.